IVM.
This is Storytellers and Story Sellers on the IVM Podcast Network, and you're listening to Vineet live on tape. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with Radhika Lavu, the producer behind the cult hit Telugu web series Gods of Dharmapuri and a host of other interesting video and filmmaking concepts over the last 10 years. To quickly introduce Radhika, it says on the internet that she's done over 100 documentaries for the AP government. She's also been part of filmmaking for ads. And I, while doing research for this episode, also happened to see a couple of wedding videos that she's made. So a consummate filmmaker then. Hi Radhika, welcome to the show.
Hi Vineet. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on. Without much further ado, let's get you started with just a recap of your journey, right? I think 2019, October 23rd was when GOD came out, but I'd love to get started maybe a few years earlier than that, when you were starting out as a filmmaker, right? First of all, tell us how you got started into filmmaking, right? There's so many aspects to breaking down filmmaker and producer, but I want to start with why and how.
I think I would call it as a love affair with cinema. A love affair had started very early, since childhood. While watching Sound of Music, I've been a big Mani Ratnam sir. So I think Anjali was one of the first few films I watched. I think there's one more movie I remember, which was, it's Tom Hanks' movie, Life is Box of Chocolates. Life is Box of Chocolates. Forrest Gump.
Oh, yeah. Forrest Gump.
Sorry. Forrest Gump. Right. So that line stuck for years.
Both movies have running as a theme.
Yeah, ironically, yes. So I watched these movies in theatre, and I was brought up in Delhi. And, I used to go to Pragati Maidan with my friends, and we used to watch these movies in multiple languages, multiple foreign languages with English subtitles. There used to be a theatre which used to showcase foreign language films once a week in Pragati Maidan in Delhi. So I think I exposed myself to a lot of films across the globe, and I think my love affair had started then, watching movies and the intrigue and the awe that I used to sit in theatres. All of us have that, but I think very few of us have that intent and that drive to be part of the whole process and also try their hand in making classics like those. And, I had an ambition, and my parents saw that, and I think they were extremely supportive in just letting me fly and do my thing. And so, yeah, that's how the love affair started. And, then I wanted to still by my parents to experiment, not just films, but different parts of media, to understand and explore, experiment with different of media, either it's radio, television, or the other aspects. Hence, I've done my bachelor's in mass communication. So I've done my bachelor's in mass communication, wherein we were exposed, and we were, our horizons broadened in terms of the other parts of the media also, not just traditional media, radio, television, the other aspects I meant. But I think my eyes were set. I did a mass communication course, but my eyes were set where I wanted it to be. And I think touchwood, how the love affair went on. And post my bachelor's, wanted to dive deep into the whole art of storytelling, the whole art of filmmaking. I happened to be in London for a holiday. So I went around. I went to colleges. I saw the whole scenario of London's vibe, a very artistic and a very, very deep, in-depth, art of storytelling and filmmaking. I think we call it the vibe. So I lived the vibe in London, and, I applied in Goldsmiths. I knew that it's going to be very difficult because they take in 12 students in a year. So, and I think I tried my best. I think I was as honest as possible. I was 19 years then, as honest as possible. And I think I was the youngest. I was the youngest in the class. So I was like Alice in Wonderland in a place that, I just absorbed everything what went around me, what happened around me. It was, to be frank, because, I'm just being very spontaneous when I say this, it was extremely nerve-wracking to, being 19 in a very foreign country. The mass communication course was very theoretical and practical. So the filmmaking course and master's in filmmaking course is very practical. So, I asked my tutor that why did you select me? Because there was a time when, I was feeling lost. my classmates were able to understand, were able to read between the lines. And I wasn't able to read between the lines. There's no spoon feeding when you go abroad to study. There's no spoon feeding. They expect you to, educate yourself, learn. So I asked my tutor that, Gary, why did you even hire me? I'm like a kid, in the block and all of that. He said, you have that hunger. And, that hunger, you just do not give up. Just keep going, keep learning. It's all right. Even if you don't that's all right. You'll learn in the second one. So there's one thing I've learned from him is don't make the same mistakes. Try learning from the old mistakes. So yeah, it's been, I think, a lovely and an extremely, life-changing time in London Film Unite. When you watch, I've never heard about Godard in Bachelors. So you exposed to Godard there, all of that. So it's been good.
I want to just slide in there and ask you about, you started talking about how you found your passion early on, right? But then still, while you were learning how to chase that passion down, or learning the tricks of the trade, there were sort of moments of, I'm guessing, self-doubt or moments of difficulty, right? And I think that to me, especially when I speak to successful creative people, who've chased their passion down, I think those moments are like massive moments of truth, right? That's where you realize that, hey, Godard, when he was making whatever, Breathless or whatever else, right? He might have gone through all of this as well, because that's what it takes to really learn the tricks of the trade and learn what your expression of filmmaking is versus somebody else's, or what are the subject matters or styles, etc. So I'm sure that's a very important part of that growth process as well. What I want to ask you next is to try and give us parallels between you starting out in filmmaking versus you starting out as an entrepreneur, because you started a production company as well, right? So now you're not just a producer, filmmaker, you're also an entrepreneur. Were there similarities in how you tried to your first steps in filmmaking versus your first steps in entrepreneurship?
There are, but at the same time, being you need to be more practical. You need to be more in coordinates with the market practices and, what is going around in the market. So as a filmmaker, you're very creative. You want to explore. You want to push the boundaries. You want to push the envelope. Being an entrepreneur, the practicality matters. There are timelines. You need to take into consideration the market strategies and also what the audiences are and what kind of audiences, what is the kind of content they're watching these days. So are we being up to date? So, it's a combination of both. So I think that's where it becomes even more challenging that, when you're trying to push the envelope, you don't drown into the whole process of making a film, because as a producer, I take a step back.
Right.
Extremely involved in a project to have a bird's eye view. When you have a bird's eye view as a producer, as an entrepreneur, right, we need to have a bird's eye view. Extremely important to, have solutions ready. You see the problem even before they arrive, having a bird's eye view. That is a personal experience of mine that, I'm not saying that it has come very easy to me. It has taken me at times when I've absolutely drowned myself into, making a content. I think that comes very naturally to me. But with time, I've understood that if I have to keep going on, then I need to have a healthy balance. So with time, I've learned to strike that balance between passionate and driven content making and being an entrepreneur, wherein if I don't have this, I can't, continue making films that I would like to make, content that I'd like to produce. So yeah, it's a healthy balance.
Spoken like a really balanced creative producer. I mean, that's the sense that I'm getting. Let me jump right into Gods of Dharmapuri, because at the risk of saying that it looks like Vasepur in Telugu, and that, I mean that as a complete compliment, that it looks like Vasepur in Telugu. It's nothing like anything that has been put up there, especially from Telugu. Before we talk about what the pitch was and how did your role as a producer play out, I want to ask you something really simple. When you were putting this together, right? I'm guessing over 2018, 2019, when it was in pre-prod and shoot. If I were to reduce God into an expectation versus reality meme from you, right? Did you expect it to be this kind of like a cult favorite? Did you expect it to be garner the kind of success it has? And for my listeners, let me tell you, Gods of Dharmapuri is among the top 3 most engaged with web series in Telugu of all time. Like that's all time, not like 1 month in a year, not a year, of all time, right? That takes some doing, right? So yeah, but back to my question. Did you expect it?
No, because as a producer, as a filmmaker, action house owner, someone who's founded a production company, I think I've been very, my eyes are set on doing the best. Yes, you do think, will the audiences like it? Will they consume it? Will they understand it? Are we too progressive? Those questions do pop. I'm like any other person that those kind of questions do pop out of the head. But some of the energy, I think, from day one was extremely positive and extremely, we passed it on. It is completely with a lot of arguments and, different perspectives. We want it like this. The other person will say, no, I think we should, do something like that. So I think I believe in agreeing to, disagree. So I believe that, you should not leave the room until you convince me or I convince you. So, I come from that school of thought. The company has to be extremely open and, it starts from me and it boils down to the remaining team members. So I think when I got this opportunity, I was pitching for different stories to OTTs, and OTTs had just come in like a year, 2 years, and they were still testing waters with what kind of content will the audiences like, and all of that. And one pitch is not approved, I used to get another script the next day. So I think when I was given this opportunity saying that, Radhika, we'd like to independently produce this, I was on top of a mountain. I think I was over the moon saying that, there you go. I've got this one opportunity and I'm going to put all in. I'm not going to be worried about if it's going to be a hit, flop. I don't care at that point. Frankly, I didn't. For me, it was, there's a responsibility.
Right.
And it's one of the, in terms of the budgets and all that also. And they trusted an independent producer like me. And, I need to do the best. I need to make sure that we deliver, not just but we deliver, complete team, I meant. So we deliver. And so, yes, I think, no, I didn't expect. And when I think the whole team and myself, when we had such positive feedback and such acts coming away, that just, I think it just completely gave me a lot more confidence and also a kind of a, responsibility. Also, along with confidence, the responsibility too, with the kind of content that has to be produced and, has to be churned out from the production. So great love that I started and founded. So no, I haven't. Hence, it took me a lot of time. It's not just me. I think the whole team, we were exhausted. So, I think when we had all these people message, call on Instagram or on, any events we used to go to, I think our, the fatigue or, we were feeling low on energy because it was a marathon for us, frankly. So I think it just uplifted us, and that's extremely endearing.
How long did you shoot for?
75 days.
Oh, wow. That's a
75 days, out of which...
That's a lot, yeah.
Fifth was outdoor 50 days with a set and a crew of 105. Outdoor. And so we became one big family, actually, with so many days, almost approximately 2 months staying outdoors near Hampi, a very beautiful, picturesque place like Hampi. So, yeah, no, it wasn't expected. Coming back to the question that I'm answering, it wasn't expected. My eyes were just set on doing the best that I can. But the reviews or people's reactions and their positive feedback towards it was extremely, I think it was good. It was a feel good.
And that's just great to hear. And I hope any young filmmakers listening to you talk get exactly the Gita ka sar out of what you said, right? Just focus on doing your best. Don't worry about what's going to happen later or how the audience is going to receive it. Just like Krishna, right? But let me ask you this: a couple of things about the show itself, right? What is the pitch like to Z5? I mean, you went in, you said, "Hey, we've got this amazing web series concept," but how did it play out, right? I mean, I'd love for you to talk about this from a perspective where you're a first-time independent web series producer. Was this the first time that you were doing this?
when I'd sensed that there's a certain genre which was usually, that OTTs were exploring, and they were looking at something raw, gritty, and, you're right, Gangs of Wasseypurish, they were looking at something like that. I look at something very challenging, frankly, and that is not a genre that I saw myself making. I'm more of a very, I like Godfather. See, Godfather again isn't bloody. It's raw. It's very real, but it's not bloody. And, it's not killing, just slicing people off and everything. So I've been a big fan
more
of Godfather.
Tarantino than Godard. That way.
Yes. So I cringe. I love Tarantino. Frankly, I think he comes from a very non-film background, and he's made such cult films. And I've been a big fan of Tarantino. And still one. So when I took this as a challenge, I said, why not? This is something, if I can pitch and, if it is approved by an OTT and, they see a scope in something like this, why not? So I just jumped. I've given a pitch to them. But one thing that, when we're talking about this, there's something called a pitch Bible, which people are following right now. But, I started it a long time back, wherein, the research, and we just don't, I used to never go with just a concept. So I used to go with a complete Bible in terms of, having a lot of clarity in the concept that we were developing on. So that helped a lot. And this is something I've told to a lot of filmmakers or people that I've met after God that, you need to be very clear. There has to be a clarity of thought in terms of you need to have that in-depth analysis of each and every character and each and every, it's a, beginning, middle, and an end. So you need to have a clarity in terms of the whole sequence of your film and how do you see it. So until unless I don't have a clarity, I cannot go and convince an investor or an OTT person. So, that having the clarity of thought and not just very half-baked concept.
So let me ask you this then. Both Hamza Ali and Anish, the writers for GOD, are first-time writers for a web series. I think you're also a first-time producer for a web series. And like you said, right, it's an art form that's very different from movies, right, or from a theatrical release movie or from a TV show. It's got its own sort of codes and mores. It's got its own rules. How did you prepare for that, right? Like between the writers and the producer and the director, I'm guessing that must have been very new for you to encounter as well. So how did you prepare for that?
I think for us, there were a lot of drafts. There were a couple of drafts. And the first few episodes when we were writing, the initial hiccups were evident in terms of the drafts which were written. And I think a lot of discussions happened when I said, when I said that, either you convince you or I convince you was taken very seriously on board. And I'm a kind of a producer who gets involved from the beginning, from the writing stages itself. And, because I think it's very important for a producer to have a 360 angle complete information on what's happening with the script and the content and hence the road can be, the path can be charted out for that. So coming back to this, I think we saw a lot of series. We were anyways consuming a lot of series on Netflix by then to have an understanding that, how it goes. So we started reading up, at least I started reading up, and I think Anish also was watching, consuming a lot of series and binge watching series on Netflix Prime at that point. And we had a lot of Western series during that time, not many of Indian web series which were out. Not a couple of them are out, but that's not something that we wanted to have it as a reference in terms of understanding the storytelling process for a series. One major learning that we've derived from watching all of that, and something that we've incorporated was in a film, for a 2-3 hours film, we have a beginning, middle, and an end. When you learn filmmaking, we're taught this, a beginning, middle, and an end. In a series, we have a whole season beginning, middle, and an end. And we have an episodic beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
So when you're writing an episode, you have to keep this into, in consideration and in mind. And also need to have a broad view of what is your beginning, middle, and end for a whole series. So, and cliffhangers.
Absolutely.
Are very important when you write for a series. And I think we've learned it the hard way because we didn't have any precedence when we were working on this. So I think we just, all of us held hands and just, traveled in terms of going through the process. But it's a very interesting one, Vineet. I'll tell you, you can explore so many characters. It's an unending exploration. If you ask me for a series, I think I was in heaven. I was, the kind of characters which were being etched, the characters which were, we were giving birth to these characters and we were trying to see the arc of these characters. So one more thing I think which I've learned personally, that when you are very clear of your character and the characterization and how they're going to look, how they're going to behave, what are their traits, and how, what's the height, weight, are they dark, fair, how are they going to talk, how's the slang? When you are very clear and you've etched that character, very well, it becomes easier to maneuver the character into a story, how they're going to react to a story, in a story, when faced with circumstances. So these were I think they're small, but they were very, very crucial learnings, which I'm going to be incorporating on, and I started incorporating. I just finished producing another content right now. So I think it became more easier in terms of, I know where the blocks are going to be with my writers and how to, help them with those blocks.
Since you're talking about enabling writers and their talents, I think one challenge that I have also witnessed upfront and very, close and upfront, is when you're writing a period piece, right? Or when you're creating a period piece, there's a lot of considerations that go into every scene, pretty much, right? How's it going to look? What's going to be in the background? How's the set going to be? And like it or not, for the writer, it's a word on the page, but for the producer, it's months of hard work, right? And in my head, and I saw this happen very closely when TVF was doing Ye Meri Family a couple of years ago. That conflict is very interesting to sort of navigate, right? Because both the writer and the producer are coming from the same place, right? We want to make it authentic. We want to make sure that it looks representative of the time. We're not, shortchanging any characters, but there's also budget, right? And that's squarely the producer's problem. How did that go for you? Especially when, this being the first time you're doing a period piece. I know you're doing another one. It's like a 6-part web series, which is also set in the 50s and the 60s. And I'm sure lots of learnings from here that you're applying there. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
I'll start with God, then I'll go on to the other period piece that I'm talking about. So God actually, it was a conscious decision not to recreate a certain period in a restricted space.
Right.
I think the genre would have been best suited for a lot of outdoor sequences and go to these, because when I said Hampi, takes you back to that era. It has that, and the areas around Hampi, Anegundi, Hospet. So there are a lot of small places, hamlets around, small villages and towns around Hampi. And we shot extensively in a place called Anegundi. And it's a beautiful place. The Raja still stays there. See, the descendants of the Vijayanagara Empire. So the Raja still stays there. And, we wanted to be courteous enough to go ask his permission to shoot in his, in his backyard. And he actually gave out his backyard and the front yard to shoot for us. So
how cool.
That was very, very, So I don't know. I think a filmmaker's charm works there. So it did work there. And so it was good. It was very good. So God, taking into consideration the locations which can draw you into an era, into a certain period, was very important. So our first task was that. The second task was, how do we convince our audiences that this is 1970s? Even if you're shooting in Hyderabad, how do you convince? And I think transparency and communication, when I spoke about communication, it's very important when you're talking to your team members that, this is my budget, this is that we have. We can't, go beyond this. So I'm not someone who's trying to cut corners. This is the reality. This is my budget at this point. And, we need to give an extremely good series. We've been given this opportunity. It's the first time. If it's a hit, then it's going to be the first time. If it's a flop, even then it's going to be the first time. So let's just, so that's not just with the director. I think the budgets were discussed with the cinematographer, with the production designer, the art director, the costume designer, everyone, the executive producer, co-producers, everyone knew that what space we were working on. And I wanted to be honest about it and transparent about it so that, they don't come from the aspect that, acha, ye to producer hai, they're not giving the money that we need. So I think it was a group discussion that, we have this set budget. How do we convince the audiences that, this is the era that we're drawing them in? So outdoor, we were very clear that we had to shoot most of it outdoor. 80% of it was shot in outdoor, by the way. So 70-80% of it was shot outdoor. So I think if you've seen now, so we went to Ballari. So we went to this very age-old mine in Ballari to, give that very rocky terrain, mining town kind of a feel to it. And then we shot in Hampi and Anegundi and the remaining, the surrounding areas, because they are those UNESCO heritage sites, which itself, draws you into that era. So I think apart from that, when you go indoors, as I said, production design, costume, lighting, everything adds to that. So I had a very able team and a very understanding team, I think, who understood and who agreed. And, we reached a common conclusion. Hiccups and problems are part of filmmaking. It's like, it's something you just have to be ready for anything. And, but if there's a basic understanding with each other, between the team members, that, what the common goal is. And, the journey is something that, with hiccups, no hiccups, we just have to keep going on. So I'm being very philosophical when we say that, but I did experience that with each and every...
No, but the show must go on, right? That's how it is.
It has to. It has to. So, and it will go on for whoever, has that inclination towards making something. It will keep going on. So that was God. Now with Unheard, it's right now, when I got the story when the story came onto my table, so we had to go to early 1900s, pre-independence era.
Right.
So the story pans out between 1908 to 1949. So it takes,
that's a long start.
So it takes me even more back. So so that was even more challenging. But, we were in the post-pandemic time. We didn't have the liberty to have a huge crew or go to outdoor or have huge sets. I didn't want to risk my people. At the same time, I've had my whole team who was ready to start creating. So I had all of them saying that, Radhika, we need to go back to sets. We need to start creating. We need to start writing. I said, acha, theek hai, all right. So we have a piece. We have a period piece. So I've been a big fan of conversations. Coffee and cigarettes are one of my favorite conversational content that is there on on the web and to consume. So I said, acha, theek hai, let's make a conversational series and a film. So the conversations will happen from 1908 to 1949. So when this writer-director, Aditya, came to me and said, conversations, let's have it. And it's the unheard perspectives of people in Hyderabad. So during that era. So when, you and I have read history and, it's been part of our school. We've learned about Gandhi. We've learned about Jawaharlal Nehru. We've learned about Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. We've learned about all the very well-known freedom fighters. Have we ever been exposed and have we ever been enlightened or, open to understanding the other perspectives, the common man's perspective during that era? And who's affected with regional, national, and international events, who are affected by the World War I, who are affected by flu, who are affected by the Nizam and the Union of India fight. Have we heard about all of that? We haven't.
Beautiful.
So, unheard is that. Unheard is these unheard perspectives, unheard stories of people in Hyderabad. So the conversations are the regular life, art, culture, books. They talk about Rabindranath Tagore. They talk about World War I. They talk about Nizam, Union of India, how Nizam wanted a three-nation theory. He proposed a three-nation theory that Hyderabad will become a different country altogether. And Pakistan anyways was, it got divided. And, how I think Nizam agreed by 1949, he agreed to unify Hyderabad into India. So these are the topics that we broach upon. but there are perspectives of people. So we're not taking sides. I was very clear with my writer that let's not take sides. And, as a storyteller, we need to put forth the point of views of different characters and their perspectives. So this was 1908 to 1949. How do we do? I can't have huge sets, but at the same time, you need to draw people into that era. You need to make it look like it is 1908 Hyderabad. So how do we do that? So we just took a small space and we owned it. We converted it completely. So the onus was majorly on the writing and the acting and the production design, cinematography. Major onus was on this.
Right.
So my first task was to make sure that we write it in such a way that it draws you in. So, I think I was very clear that we have to make cerebral content. I wanted to challenge myself after God and make a content which is cerebral. When we say cerebral, I think it resonates with the audiences who understand and, the art of storytelling and not just films as a commercial entity that we consume. So I was very clear on that. And I was in that experimental phase that, let's do this. So I think post which, when we were very sure about how it was written, post which I think we went to Aditya, the writer-director, and myself, we went to locations, we saw, and, I was surprised at how much Hyderabad has to offer. And, what all locations were there in the heart of the city. I didn't have to go anywhere outside the city. Outside the city was a no-go. It's something that we couldn't even do at that time. So I think we started going around. We started going around these old structures that way. So when you see it, when it comes out in any OTT, I think you'll understand what I'm trying to say. So
no, I'm loving it. I'm loving the description you've given me. In my head, it's like Linklater's Slacker, but through pre-independence time, like conversations. Sounds beautiful. It totally sounds amazing.
So even here, Unheard, I think I was very honest with my team that, there are restricted resources, there are restricted number of people on the set. So how do we, segregate the work, and how do we own it? How do we join hands and work towards that? So it worked for me, for this team also, that being transparent and trying to make them understand that the resources are less because it's not been a great financial year, even for me as an independent producer. So how do we make the most that we have with us? So again, I think I've been extremely lucky to have a very, very able and extremely hardworking team. And I think I pushed the boundaries even for them, and they delivered. All of them delivered. So
I'm sure that's a very satisfying feeling.
Yes.
Let me ask you this question to round off this segment on sort of GOD and production. I'm sure you made mistakes while making GOD, right? And I'm sure there was like tough decisions that you might have felt like you do differently later. Any thoughts on that? Any like sort of learnings that you're like, hey, that's something we did really right, and that's something we did maybe not so right, and I'd do it differently, or I'm going to do it differently with Unheard.
Rehearsing,
right?
So something that I was very clear with my team that actors need to rehearse extensively before going onto the set, because production time is an extremely crucial and valuable. The production time should not be utilized to rehearse on the sets.
Right.
Production time, or when the meter starts in the morning, when you say 7 to 7 is the call sheet. When it starts at 7 is the clap has to be on the first principal photography, not the rehearsal. Getting ready, rehearsing the lines can be before the first shot. So that's something that I've learned. And I started, as I said, I started giving a lot of more importance to the time that everyone is on the set. Each and every minute, each and every second matters. The production time I meant. So the rehearsals, not with just the actors, but even in terms of the cinematography, with great pride, I can say, I don't know how many people do that nowadays, but my director and my cinematographer on Unheard used to rehearse the camera movements days before the actual shoot. They had that amount of clarity, and it helped me immensely. I didn't even go, I think when I told them 7 to 7, they finished an hour before, but never an hour later. So that's how prepared they were. So it was going back to school for me, frankly. It was extremely going back to school. I think everybody's been extremely cooperative that day. And, when you just have to make sense, Vineet. I think, the demands, even my demands, it needs to resonate with the remaining team members also when I say that, it's only going to help us. So when I said God, I'm not saying that we didn't do that. We didn't do it extensively.
Right.
Rehearsals, and because, we had a certain time limit.
Right. No, I think that's just pearls of wisdom, I think, right? Often the importance of preparation, people tend to forget that it has financial implications, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, of course it matters that how was the performance and what are the angles and how it was composed, but the financial implications of preparation are massive, right? Every additional take is money. And I think that's just a beautiful back to basics, very, very simple sort of thing for people to abide by, right? Let me flip this over and take a step back from what you're doing right now to the Telugu digital entertainment industry at large, right? It's an exciting time to be creating native content, right? It's leveled the playing field where independent producers are casting up-and-coming talent like a Satyadev, competing with the biggest banners there are. What has you most excited about this space overall, right? And not just about the stuff that you're doing, but what you're seeing around you.
A couple of years back, when somebody used to ask me, Vineet, that, what is the next step? You've produced advertisements, you've produced wedding films, you've produced corporate films, you've done all of that. So I think, it's quite natural that, the journey is going to end towards making a film, a feature film. For me, frankly, I think adhering to or following a set formula, when you make a film, there's a formula. People coming to the theaters, they come there because of a certain formula, which has been repeated. Every once in a while, there will be a film which will come and which will just declutter, sometimes, and that becomes a hit. But usually there's a set formula that is followed and, in that way. For a filmmaker like me, I didn't want to follow that formula. For me, it was, no, I don't want to do that. I think I'll just wait. Right. I'll be patient. Let me see what comes out. What is next in the page for me. So I used to just wait it out. I used to keep pushing it. No, I really do not want to do the song and dance. I would like to do a song and dance one day, but at that time I was in that, I want to explore, I want to experiment. It's a phase for experimentation. I cannot experiment after a certain point, maybe. So, you're in that phase. Sure. You understand what I'm trying to say, right? So
absolutely.
I kept pushing, family, friends, Radhika, when are you making your next feature film? When is your feature film? When's your big ticket? I used to say, okay, in due course of time, we'll come to that. When digital revolution happened, digital OTTs happened, I saw the light, out of the tunnel. And I saw that slowly concepts were being experimented, stories were being experimented. It was an exciting phase for me wherein I was not just pitching, I was never pitching for a feature film, but I had stories. I had stories written. I was sitting on a pile of them saying that one day when the time comes, then I have, the whole lot to pitch and all of that. The day had come wherein, we're writing whatever we wrote. Let's just keep the doors open from there. But then when we were pitching, I again understood that OTTs were again following the same formula. They're being very choosy. Not choosy, I think choosy is the wrong word. I think they're being very, very, they're following the same. So if there's a formula for theaters, even for OTTs, they started the same, following the same formula that these genres, it has to be this, it has to be that. But I didn't lose hope. I said, okay, maybe, everyone is just trying to test waters. Let us see what happens after a year or 2 years. So I kept on pitching. Then I think it's just destiny that I met Z5 in Mumbai in one of my meetings and continuous pitching and, just pitching and just pitching and trying to understand, and didn't lose hope there. I just met my, a person who just understands the space that I'm talking about. And also for the fact that I'd come to a conclusion that let's do what they want to do, but with a different, like an old wine in a new bottle. So it's like it's a marriage of both the worlds. So I'm doing what they are expecting because, see, what they're expecting is not anything different from what audiences want because they have statistics in place and they know who their TG is. And, I was trying to understand the TG, not just a storyteller who wants to tell a story, but also understand the TG. So how do I combine both? So with time, I've understood that how do I combine both it wasn't easy for me to convince, because I was convinced that this is going to be the next big thing. This is going to be a space that, which is going to be the most exciting phase for storytellers and filmmakers. But it wasn't easy to convince my team members and the actors. It wasn't easy. For them, it's still the next best thing. It's not the best thing, Right. For me, it was the best thing. Either I'm making for a digital platform, or in the future when I make for the theaters, I think it's going to be with equal honesty and equal vigor and equal zest. It wasn't easy convincing the team, saying that, let's do this. And not even the same budgets. There are less budgets than making a film. How do we do that? Right. So my strategy or technique at that time was saying that, Anish, Satya, I think will be the first persons. If we have to do something like this, and if we deliver, if we make something like this, and whatever is written on script, we translate it into visuals and put it on screen, I think we're there. So my pitch for Satya, I think Satya will remember this again. My pitch to Satya was, Satya, you're going to be, the next big star on digital if you do this. So right. that was my pitch as a producer to him.
And people have loved him, right? In the show. He's just stand out.
Yeah. So I think it was more of, transferring the same excitement and the same belief that, and on top of that, I also told Satya that, more than theaters, people are moving towards digital. Everyone's on Instagram. Everyone's on social media. I think his target audiences, I told him, if this becomes a hit, you're an overnight hit, Satya. That's all I said. I said, you're an overnight hit.
Right.
So I think he got sold, and he liked the story also. So the rest is history after that. But, the challenge is going to be, Vineet, to sustain that. The content which is made, either sustain it or just up the curve from there. So that's the most challenging, because the kind of content which is produced and, put forth to audiences these days is phenomenal. I'm loving the phase right now. Not just regional, I think national, international content. I'm a big fan of Queen. And I love the production quality of that, how it's made, how authentic it looks, and how, I think for me, if I think of Queen Elizabeth, I will look at that actor, thinking that, okay, maybe, she has. That's how drawn you are to that content. So I've been hearing great things about Queen's, I think, a lot of other series. I watched one on Sony Live recently, the Harshit Mehta scam.
The Scam 1992 thing,
best in India till date. Right. Frankly, I think it was honest more than anything. I think the honesty was something which was very, very clear from the first shot, first scene. And I think it was earnestly made also. And Hansal Mehta has done a very good job with that. As I said, I think it's exciting time to be on digital. But I think all filmmakers, including myself, I think we need to be very careful with the content, because there's a sea of content right now. So, what do you make which is very different from that is already there? And how do you challenge yourself? Because I think digital is a place where I think you have to push the boundaries. You have to strike the ball out of the court.
Which is what my next question, like sort of penultimate question to you is, now you're not with a clean slate anymore, right? You have a hit behind you. I read about season 2 of GOD being set closer to, in another part of the city, and sort of still being linked to the first season, but I think you're looking at a separate setting for season 2, right? It kind of reminds me of how The Wire was made in season 1 was one part of the city and the other. So very interesting take there. You've obviously got Unheard rolling. It sounds phenomenal. What has changed for you, right? From being, LNR being a young production house, you being first time producer or for a big budget web series. Now you're someone who's got a couple of notches on your belt, and you're still obviously, I'm sure, hungry for more and looking at bigger, better things. How things changed for you? Has it become dramatically easier, or is it like a little bit incrementally easier? How have things changed for you?
I think the word that just used, hunger. That hunger, I think, is still there. And it's always going to be there, because without that hunger, I don't think so that, the drive is going to be there to satiate that hunger of, making content and good content. Frankly, I'm someone who believes in a good quality more than quantity. in terms of, I do not have the ambition of churning out 5 series or 5 films in a year. For me, it needs to be different from the rest, and also has to, I think, reach out to the audiences in a way, and and it needs to be, I think, if I'll be honest, it needs to be the best in the market. So that's where I go towards. That also means that I don't make a lot. I'm very careful introducing either it's a film or a series or an advertisement, whatever that is. I'm very, who I collaborate with, because filmmaking is a collaborative art. So it needs to, the art itself, the collaborative art needs to be extremely well, thought over process that way.
Right.
So I didn't want to rush post season 1 being a hit. I didn't want to rush. I wanted to understand what is the next step. Even with season 2, I wanted to give it a little more time. Even with season 2, I didn't want to rush by saying, Acha, the first season was a hit. Let's just go straight, jump into season 2. I was very clear that, the season 2 should not fall into the same, the universe is there, the God universe, that's something that we've created. So, I just have this thought that instead of Dharmapuri, why can't it be Divasima? Divasima is a 3-side water. So it's a fisherman's colony. Right. From a very rocky terrain, we go into a fisherman's colony wherein the godfatherly, like a setup is again starting from a different terrain altogether. So which is, that story is coming with loggerheads with the story number 1. So they're merging by end of season 2. Very basic idea I had. So I got my writers to sit down, write, and it has come phenomenal that way in terms of how it has come out.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I think as a filmmaker, as a producer who's produced a series which has been well received by the audiences, I think there's a lot more responsibility, when I started introspecting that, what kind of content that I like to make? How do I challenge myself? What keeps me exciting? What excites me? By now, I think my team knows that what kind of scripts will excite me and, which is going to get me onto the office table and start talking about it. So there are such, so many writers, Vineet. I think it's just, you just have to open your doors and listen to all these writers who are waiting to be heard. And I started listening to, I think throughout the pandemic, I was listening to almost 7 to 10, scripts, narrations every week. So I've heard a lot to understand that, what writers are writing up, because you write something that you experience. So stories are picked up all around us. What you've heard, it's a cognitive feeling also. So what you see, what you hear, what you experience is what you write. So when you read such offbeat stories, you see that, writers are also, are experimenting. They're pushing the boundaries too. So that's about it. I think, challenging is one and more responsible towards the content that has to be produced. So there has to be a mark of the production house in terms of, or the producer or filmmakers behind, if I'm driving that, there has to be a certain mark in terms of, okay, I think that's what I'm striving to work towards. So hopefully we'll see.
Sounds fantastic. And I think the way you started talking about what you're putting out needs to be the best. I think with the kind of wisdom that you clearly have on putting stuff together, I mean, it's only going to go onwards and upwards from here. I'm for sure looking forward to the stuff that you're putting out. My sort of last question from the interview, and then I have just one more, is this whole infrastructure has, come together in the last couple of years. Geo and smartphones are sort of large consumer side changes that have really helped. What does the industry, specifically in Telugu, need to, sustain this momentum that you've gathered, right? Are there infrastructure changes required? Is the government coming in? Is the tourism board turning in? What would you say is the infrastructure support? Okay? So just to put it in a simple manner, that's needed to sustain this momentum.
I think it starts with the giants of the industry, the big production houses, producers, opening up. They're already, I think, I know quite a few of them who have started opening their gates to their studios and inviting new talent not just writers, actors. When I say digital, it's a revolution. It's not just for writers, but also for directors, actors. And there's a lot of work, pouring in for people across all the departments of making a film. So not just stick to those, the few lot that are there, and quite open to giving opportunities to everyone. So it starts with them. It starts with all the production houses hiring new talent across all departments. And that's something which is, when I say responsible, responsibility towards this also. So, it's very easy to work with the comfortable few that but what I have learned is, it might be a little uncomfortable to, go beyond your comfort zone and meet new talent, but you just have to be patient. You have to just see and, just have to keep meeting people and listening to narrations. I've learned it the hard way. So that's something that I think, not infrastructurally, but I meant, as a whole, industry as a whole, content making as a whole. Beyond that, I think the tourism department is extremely cooperative. I've shot in one of the tourist places and extremely cooperative people. And, more so when I told them it's about Hyderabad, I think they were even more excited. They said, please, I think they're very cooperative that way. I think infrastructurally, when independent films are made, this is something that I have been thinking when independent filmmakers and films which are made on funds put together, crowdfunding films and independent films they're made, they need the support from producers and production houses and studios to promote them. So a little more open-mindedness, frankly, I think is something that, encouragement, pushing them and basically just encouraging and trying to help them make sure that they get not necessarily all filmmakers have access to Netflix. Not necessarily all filmmakers have access to Prime, Hotstar and others. And even if they have access, it's not a hard and fast rule that they'll be heard from the other side. So, I think as a community consists of, big studios, people who have been in this for decades and generations, to, independent filmmakers, to crowd fund filmmakers. It's a big community. So I think I cannot comment a lot on infrastructure, but I can comment, or I can urge or encourage the community coming together and just helping each other, sustaining and, being there and being heard, being seen. So
I think you said it best a little while ago when you said filmmaking is a collaborative art, and now is the time for so many diverse, experimental, independent filmmakers or practitioners of this art to sort of come together and try new things, right? It's just been awesome talking to you. Great getting to know the thought process behind putting together what is, I'm sure, going to be a bigger and bigger franchise coming out of Telugu web series as you put out season 2 and Unheard. My last question, which is something that I ask everyone on the show before I let them go, is I would love for you to recommend a piece of entertainment that's close to your heart to my listeners, right? I know the temptation to say Gods of Dharmapuri is very, very high. So I will do that for you. Please, everyone, go and watch Gods of Dharmapuri. But something other than that, something that's close to your heart as a student of filmmaking, lifelong student of filmmaking.
Thank you. I think when you encourage the listeners to watch Gods, I think thank you for that. But apart from that, I think the list, during pandemic, especially Vineet, I went back to classics. And, I've seen a whole lot of them. And I went back to all those black and white films, Gurudutt films, Pathir Panchali. I've seen, I think, I utilized that time to go back to watching those films. I think we just, with the usual days and, going around and jumping from one thing to another, you just forget doing that. So I think for the listeners, I think the recent one, as I said, the recent one that I've seen was Queen, Harshad Mehta's Scam, 1992 Scam. These are the two which I thoroughly enjoyed watching, extremely well made. And I think our Indian series is at par in terms of the storytelling and, how it was being handled at par with any other series made in other Western countries. So the Queen, I think, is something that has been playing in my head quite. As as a filmmaker, what happens is, I'll just share this one thing with you. You get into technicalities. You stop enjoying watching a film, frankly. There's something that I was having a chat with another filmmaker friend of mine, saying, we've just stopped enjoying how to make, how to consume or how to just sit as a child and just watch a film. We've stopped enjoying that because we dissect it. Yes, so what? I think these guys used this camera. I think they've used this technique. The sync sound, I think it should have been a little better. So you start dissecting it. So you stop enjoying it. So, there are very few films which I watched and I've just watched them. I didn't dissect them. Revenant was one such film. I watched it in theater and I was in awe of how it was shot and how it just came alive. And I still have goosebumps when I talk about Revenant. And I think Queen is something that has been with me for quite some time. I think these two, people who haven't seen Revenant, I think it's already there on OTT platforms who didn't get a chance to watch it in theaters, should watch. I think that's something that I think Maniratnam's films, Anjali. So I went back to watching all of that, old films, Alaypaite, Anjali. I'm a big fan of all these people. As I said, Satyajit's Ray, watching films. Also Meera Nair. I'm a huge fan of Meera Nair too. So, her earlier films is something that, I would suggest at this point. Salam Bombay. Salam Bombay is one of those few.
Lovely film. Yeah.
Yes, lovely film. I'm sorry I'm suggesting all old films, but they're available on digital platforms now.
Please,
so
I'll just... I love it when people talk about old films.
Monsoon Wedding. I thoroughly enjoyed Monsoon Wedding, and as I said, I'm from Delhi, so I connected a lot with that content. So I think they were good ones. I think going back to when I say Tarantino, Inglourious Bastards, gone back to that, Kill Bill. I think Pulp Fiction. As I said, I can go on and on, Vineet, so you could just have to stop me there. So
I know, and which is what I'm doing, and I'd love to just take this moment and spend a moment to remember Soumitra Chatterjee from the Oppo trilogy, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. Again, but all those movies that Radhika talked about are absolute classics, right up to Inglourious Bastards. I mean, definitely all the Indian stuff and the classic foreign stuff that she talked about. Do check it out. That's it. That brings us to the end of this episode. Radhika, it was absolutely smashing talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and for your pearls of wisdom. I hope you had fun. I had fun.
I can go on and on, Vineet. You tell me 1 more hour, I'll be here. So I can go on and on. So, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for just making me relive all those moments and, the past and the experiences and all of it. It's been great talking to you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show, and we'll look forward to season 2 of Gods of Dharmapuri and Unheard very, very soon. That's it on this episode of Storytellers and Storysellers with Radhika Lavu. This is Vineet Kanabar saying goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's been an absolutely incredible week on the network. We had so many great guests, so many great episodes. Advertising is dead. We had Faye D'Souza on. Varun took a break for 4 weeks, but what a bang he's back with. Siddharth Deshmukh celebrates the 100th episode of The Traveling Professor. It is an amazing show which I cannot say enough good things about. Please do listen to it. And a different Siddharth on the network, Siddharth Bhatia. He's just been absolutely guest after guest, right? This week, Zoya Akhtar talking about Gully Boy. I couldn't imagine a more interesting conversation. Ragini Kumar is on 2 different episodes this week. She is on Cyrus Says and she is on Edges and Sledges, both in anticipation of her new show Zindagi Diaries. Do check out her appearance on both of those regular shows and her new show as well. Tanvi and Shloka, the Millennial Athlete, had a phenomenal episode with Dinesh Karthik and Abhishek Nair. Absolutely riveting stuff, talking about mentorship in many different ways. Definitely do give that a listen. And finally, I have a request to all of you. We have our listener survey going out this week. Every year we send out a listener survey at the end of the year. We're doing it again this year. And we would really, really, really appreciate your help in letting us know a little bit more about yourself. Our advertisers are really keen to find out who is listening to us and more about them. Anything that you could do is kept anonymously, and we would really appreciate your help in this. And to sweeten the pot just a little bit, we'll be giving a randomly selected group of participants in the survey some IBM swag. Last year we gave out coffee mugs. What we're going to give out this year is still a surprise. So please do help us out. Would really, really appreciate that. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
What are some of the radical changes that are now shaping our workspace? With physical distancing and heightened safety protocols being the norm, will technology finally make its large-scale entry to the workspace? Will design as we know it change for the long term? Is it possible for the Indian commercial real estate space to adopt a 360-degree approach to sustainability? Join our hosts at the Future of Space podcast by RMZ as we deliberate with industry leaders, analysts, and bright young minds on the way forward for the workspace given the new COVID normal. Tune in to the IVM Podcasts app or wherever you stream your favorite podcasts